Alright, very good morning. My name is Kapur and today I want to talk about embracing special. So every day we walk past thousands of people, glance at hundreds of them, but we have this weird tendency to gaze at a few people much longer than others because they're out of the ordinary. Us as humans have this weird tendency to point out the differences, and that's good. Differences are what make us unique. But when we start to treat each other differently based on those differences, that's when the problem starts. And one community that faces this is a lot is the specially abled community. We treat them with the perspective of pity. We see them that they need our help, that they are nothing without us. Why is that? And this starts right from childhood. Right when they are young, these 8 million children have this perspective of pity on them. Why is that? I want to talk about that. Now, the main perspective how it forms is in school. School is the first social space a child enters into. So in school, when you enter, the child seeks familiarity, and that familiarity is given by the parental warmth of the teacher and the companionship of his peers, because those peers have the same habits and traits. But the problem once again starts when there is someone out of the ordinary, someone who doesn't have those traits and those habits. The child feels out of place. So what the mainstream schools do, they outright refuse admission to these specially abled children because their normal children would feel uncomfortable. Is that fair? Absolutely not. So to give them education, we have shunned them to special schools. And in those special schools, let me tell you, when you enter, you'll see how gloomy they are. You'll see how sad they are from the inside. Because they are shunned from the society right from birth. Now, to make you understand how these special schools work, I need to give you a brief history lesson. So after 90 years from the English Education Act of 1835, which Lord William Bentinck introduced, which was based on the Minute of Indian Education by Thomas Macaulay. That is another can of worms in itself. Christian missionaries thought that we need to reform these individuals, that we need to make them proper. What is proper? So in this habit of proper, what they did was they set up rehabilitation camps. This was not an education system. And we have based our special schools on this system. The classrooms were crammed, the educators were not trained, they treated their students like second-class citizens, and after that, there wasn't even a proper curriculum to teach them. They were just fixing them like they were some broken toys. It's not that. And here's the problem. It still persists to this day. The only thing that's changed is we have introduced one new term to our dictionary, and that is positive discrimination. We have adorned the walls of these special schools with bright cartoons, but what goes inside of them is darker than you can imagine. It is so sad because till now we don't have special needs educators properly trained. Till now the classrooms are crammed. Till now there is no proper curriculum for these students. And these so-called inclusive and vocational schools are giving admissions to these students and are fixing them apparently to this day. We are practicing a century-old practice. When will we move on? I will list 5 points why this special education system still fails in our country. Number 1, lack of awareness. Most of us aren't even aware of what the child needs. There isn't a proper government portal. The parents, educators, lawmakers don't even have an idea of what their child requires. So what we do is we go on the internet and search the symptoms. And that is the worst possible thing you can do for the child. Why? Because the internet is like the Wild West. Without authenticated information and using false articles, the information you are getting yourself and using that information to help your child is ill-advised and frankly perfunctory. It's not at all advised to use the internet in these cases. You need a professional diagnosis. But all of us think that we are oversmart. Actually, the problem is all of us are hypocrites. We believe that change needs to come, just not by us. Someone else will look after it. Number 2, lack of implementation of proper policies. On paper, we have great policies. We have created tremendous policies on paper, but at the end of the day, they are just ink on paper. They are not executed well. I'll give you one short example. The government introduced the District Disability Rehabilitation Center near district hospitals. So anyone can go into the center, a state-of-the-art facility for education of young disabled people, and for rehabilitation center for older people. Now, for 2.26 crore specially abled people in this country, only 9 centers are there as of September 2022, and more to come in the future. But when is that future going to come? That is the question. The policies are there, but the implementation is not there. Number 3, lack of trained educators. Most mainstream schools don't care about hiring a special needs educator. They feel that if a case comes of a specially abled child, they can outrightly refuse admission to that child. But what about the children who develop disorders in school? ODD, ADHD, milder cases of autism are discovered later in life when they are in the school. And when they cause disruption in class, teachers punish them. It's not their fault. They need a professional diagnosis, and a special needs educator helps the teachers, the parents, and the psychologists to help the child grow and flourish. But at least these students are lucky that they are getting mainstream education. Most specially abled students are not financially well off, so their parents can't fund a private education for them. Now, if they can't privately fund their education, they need to go into a government set-up school. And most government set-up schools refuse them admission outright. They send them to vocational schools where they learn odd jobs and menial jobs that they'll carry out in the future, pushing them below the poverty line once again. After that, if they are financially well off and their parents can fund a private education, most probably the mainstream school would refuse them outright once again. Why? Because they do not want their normal students to feel uncomfortable inside the school. This is a practice still going on even after a century. And even if they get into the mainstream school, they won't have a special needs educator, as I talked about, and they will suffer there as well. After that, 4th point is the lack of a proper curriculum. We have this set curriculum. We have made this preset molds, rigid molds for our children to fit into. But we need an education system which is malleable enough to convert itself for the child, to cover the child, and to grow the child holistically and help the educator. But what we are doing right now is fitting them into boxes they can't fit into. Their rough edges aren't just fitting in. And we have a problem with that, apparently. And I'm not here to talk about a solution. I'm here to talk about the problem because we don't even recognize this problem. The NEP 2020 has some great ideas, and we can only make a decisive judgment when they have actually come into fruition. Right now, it's just too early to talk about this. And number 5 is the inconsistent transition to employment. Most of these students get rattled when they get into adulthood. Why? Because the transition is so sudden. The school does not prepare them to go into adulthood, to go into jobs, to go into the workplace. Now, let's imagine a utopia where we have achieved inclusive classrooms. But even in that utopia, we haven't achieved inclusive workplace. On the surface, we are very inclusive. On the surface, we want to hire disabled people. On the surface, companies will hire the quota of disabled people in their companies. But only for that quota. And why is that? Because we are sending these students to vocational schools to learn odd jobs, to clean the floors, and not be the thinkers. We are creating a factory of individuals. We have created a factory where individuals just go to learn physical work. There is no mental work at all. They are not the thinkers, and this is our issue. Because every time a mainstream school refuses a child, refuses a specially abled child, we refuse a world citizen. We might just refuse the next Stephen Hawking, the next John Nash, the next Lewis Carroll, the next Muhammad Ali. And why is that? And that is because all of these problems come to one common denominator, and that is ignorance. our ignorance, our selfishness is so into us, it's innately in us that we want to treat them as the other. This othering effect in our positive discrimination never goes away. Just once when we lose this ignorance, just once when we realize that human ignorance kills growth, then only can these people flourish. Can the specially able become the special people they are. We view them as a statistic, we don't view them as people. This is our problem as a society. We want to address an issue, but when it starts to interfere with our lives, we want to step away. Why is that? Because it is our ignorance and our selfishness. Why don't we embrace the rough edges? Why don't we break the mold? Why don't we embrace special? Thank you so much.
Thank you. That really.